I want to take just a moment to extend our welcome to the parents and the children in the Children's Chapel who are worshiping with us this morning and will remain through the period of meditation. There are about 40 children in the Children's Chapel, and the groups are from the preschool level up to junior high school. There are 8 teachers. The children have as a special project the support of a high school girl in South India. It is very important, I think, for us to share this period of worship with the children and have them share it with us. In thinking about what I should say in the moments that are at my disposal, it occurs to me that it is very important, not only for those of you who are children, but for those of us who are adults, to learn how to control many things that go on inside of us. I'm sure that your parents are experts in this matter, but you are not. Well, someone has answered. So on behalf of what may be something into which you may grow sometime and something which your parents doubtless have already achieved, I want to tell you a very simple story. It's an experience which I had many years ago in India and it's appropriate because you are interested in India. It was in the city of Allahabad. A young Indian friend of mine and I were walking along the shores of the river, the Ganges, and we noticed in the distance a holy man. That is, he was described to me as being a holy man. He was tall. His body was covered with holy ash. He had simply a loincloth around his waist. His hair was long and somewhat matted, but these were not the attractive things about him. The thing that attracted me was the fact that he was walking along with a large animal. It looked like belonged to the cat family. It may have been a wildcat or a lion or something, and of course I did not get close enough to find out. But he stopped, and as he stopped, this big cat sat on his haunches. And then a group gathered at a respectful distance around, and the holy man delivered a little sermon, and this is what he said, as translated to me. Behold this animal. I have lived with him, and I have taught him how to control all of the animal impulses in his body, so that he is gentle. Any little child can come up and stroke his ears or rub his nose without any danger. And then he stopped, and his eyes crawled over every face that stood around, just like this. And then he said, you go and do likewise with all of the unrestrained impulses in your own natures. What I have taught this animal can be taught you if you believe it and try it. together, parents, children, and congregation, pray the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever and ever. Amen. Most of my sermon this morning will be reading largely. The subject, as a part of the series on which we are working, The Community of Fear, is taken from the title of a very significant study that has been released and concerning which you will hear more. But as a background for our reading and a little thinking together, I want to read a paragraph from the last thing that Olive Schreiner wrote before her death in the second decade of this century. It is an article that appeared in the London Nation and Athenaeum in 1922. It is a rather stimulating study of her attitude towards war and peace, something to which she was dedicated in many ways. The last paragraph is all that I shall read. In my native land, and here she is talking about South Africa, for though she was an English woman, she was born in South Africa, and she regarded it as her native land. In my native land, I have seen the horrors of a great war. Smoke has risen from burning homesteads. Women and children by thousands have been thrown into great camps to perish there. Men whom I've known have been tied in chairs and executed for fighting against strangers in the land of their own birth. In the world's great cities, I've seen how everywhere the upper stone grinds hard on the nether, and men and women feed upon the toil of their fellow men without any increase of spiritual beauty or joy for themselves, only a heavy congestion, while those who are fed upon grow bitter and narrow from the loss of the life that is sucked from them. Within my own soul, I have perceived elements militating against all I hungered for which the young child knew nothing. I have watched closely the great, terrible world of public life, of politics, diplomacy, and international relations, whereas under terrible magnifying glass, the greed, the ambition, the cruelty and falsehood of the individual soul are seen in so hideously enlarged and wholly unrestrained a form that it might be forgiven to one who cried out to the powers that lie behind life, is it not possible to put out a sponge and wipe up humanity from the earth? It is stained. I have realized that the struggle against the primitive self-seeking instincts in human nature, whether by the individual or in the larger social organism, is a life and death struggle to be renewed by the individual and then by the race through the ages. I've tried to wear no blinkers. I have not held a veil before my eyes that I might profess that cruelty, injustice, and mental and physical anguish were not. I've tried to look nakedly in the face those facts which make most against all hope. And yet in the darkest hour, the consciousness which I carried back with me that morning has never wholly deserted me, even as a man who clings with one hand to a rock, though the waves pass over his hand, yet knows what his hand touches. In the long course of the years which have passed, something else has happened to me. That which was for the young child only a vision, a flash of almost blinding light which it could hardly even to itself translate, has in the course of a long life's experience become a hope which I think the cool reason can find grounds to justify, and which a growing knowledge of human nature and human life does endorse. Somewhere, sometime, even on earth. Now, the title of this little study, this little tremendous study, is The Community of Fear. It is a study that was made by two men on behalf of the Fund for the Republic at the Center of the Study of Democratic Institutions in Santa Barbara. I ordered a few of these. We have some, and as long as they last, if you are interested, you may secure one. The foreword is by Rainer Niebuhr, and he sounds a very important and urgent note, and it is not from within the context of what may be regarded ordinarily as a kind of weak or soft pacifism, for as those of you who are acquainted with Rainer know, Dr. Niebuhr know that he is not in that particular category. He talks about the common danger that this book points up, and then he says that the minimal community that will give us some measure of security has been established through the sense of an involvement in a common predicament and peril. The reality of this minimal community is incidentally underlined by the growing differences between the Russians, who are aware of the common peril, and the Chinese, who are not. And then he says more, but I need not read more of it. The first section in this is called the arms race. I want to read a little of that to you, and I hope you will not be bored. It is better to, well, for 15 years we have been in the largest and most frantic arms race that the world has ever known. During this period, the Soviet Union and the United States have recognized that war between them is a possibility. Under the circumstances, each nation has attempted to put itself in the position of winning the war should it come. Actions have brought reactions, which in turn have brought new reactions. Military expenditures in both nations have increased to staggering size. With the mobilization of science and technology, capabilities for destruction have increased explosively. When World War II came to an end, the United States alone possessed the atomic bomb. This new weapon had come into existence as quickly as it did because of the fear that Germany, with many competent scientists and engineers available, might get there first. The atomic bomb created an imbalance in military capability which the Soviet Union was quick to appreciate. It is likely that the discussions of the Baruch proposals failed in 1948 in large measure because the Soviet leaders foresaw that were they to enter into such an agreement, the imbalance in nuclear military technology might be perpetuated. The Russians pursued the new technology, and by 1951, they had tested 3 nuclear weapons. We, in turn, pursued the possibility of thermonuclear devices and carried out our first test of such a device in 1952. By 1956, our own thermonuclear bomb had passed into the 3rd generation, and the Russians were manufacturing their own variety. During this period, nuclear devices were not only made larger, but they were made smaller as well. A variety of flexible, efficient fission bombs were developed for tactical use, and the United States announced that it intended to utilize such weapons should a war start. The Soviet Union followed suit. By 1956, a revolution was taking place in the means of delivery. In the United States, the B-47, with its severe range limitations, had given first-line place to the B-52 series. The Russians had substantial numbers of long and medium-range bombers, Badgers, Bears, and Bisons. But even more important, a variety of missiles had entered the picture. Soviet successes in the missile field led to the establishment of intensive programs in the United States on the Atlas, the Titan, and the Thor. The development of the Soviets' ICBMs led to the use of the U-2 in order to ferret out Soviet bases, to the establishment of alert and displaced SAC operations, and to the development of the Polaris missile designed to be carried by the nuclear-powered submarines. Improved missile capabilities led to the development of Earth satellites, first launched successfully by the Russians, then by the United States. Realization of the vulnerability of our SAC and missile bases to a first strike is now leading to the development of Atlas bases capable of withstanding explosion pressures of 25 pounds per square inch. A ballistic missile early warning system is now being put into operation. Now, a section on the effects. This section is called 10 megatons on Los Angeles. I won't read too much of that. The blast effects would exterminate virtually all but the most deeply sheltered living things within a radius of 5 miles. Blast casualties would be severe up to a distance of 10 miles. But the phenomenon that would complete the devastation of life in the entire area would be fire. The area would be one great sea of fire which would burn until there was nothing more to consume. A good proportion of the metropolitan area's 3.5 million cars and trucks would be lifted and thrown like grotesque Molotov cocktails to spew flaming gasoline, oil, and automotive shrapnel onto and into everything in their path. In an instant, most underground gasoline and oil tanks would rupture and explode within the blast area, and a large proportion of the remainder within the firestorm radius would follow, each in its own particular manner, pumps and pipes sheared, and finally higher and higher ambient temperatures which would soon expand, rupture, and explode the remainder. Beyond the blast radius, the remaining area of Los Angeles is occupied by relatively few first-class concrete and steel buildings. A much greater proportion is the debris of an industrial society, auto junkyards, lumber yards, row upon row of cheap, inflammable commercial structures. But most important, this remaining area is comprised of over 50% brush-covered hills and scrub forests. Anyone who's participated in the fighting of a California brush fire and who's acquainted with the remarkable explosive nature of the oil-carrying greasewood, sumac, and scrub pine is surprised and frightened by the volatility of the material even when it is wet. The novel aspect of a thermonuclear conflagration is that most of these highly inflammable materials would break into intense flames simultaneously, a phenomenon never before achieved either by man or by natural causes. Now I will skip to a discussion on the spread of nuclear military technology. In thinking of deterrent systems, we usually think in terms of the two major powers, the United States and the Soviet Union. Yet nuclear technology is spreading. England conducted nuclear tests several years ago. More recently, France tested her first nuclear device. It is probable that nuclear military technology will spread to a number of additional nations in the course of the next 20 years. Now, that's enough on that. Now, accidental and catalytic war. Even with only 2 nuclear powers and 4 nuclear nations in the world, there's a finite chance that an all-out nuclear war could be triggered accidentally. This could be brought about as a result of either mechanical or human failure. No machine is perfect. No human being is free from the possibility of making errors of judgment. Already, for example, there have been several accidents involving American aircraft carrying nuclear bombs, and so forth. Now, finally, near the end, there is a discussion on factors preventing agreement on arms control and disarmament, and then there is a section on defense and recovery in a thermonuclear war, and then a final section on is war obsolete. And that section is the quotation on the back of the bulletin. Now, I'd like to read one other thing and make one comment. This that I want to read now is by Sir Charles Snow, who has been talking a great deal in our country and writing and is this, well, you know who he is. Now, this is what he has to say. I want to read it to you because this is no sentimental, half-cocked, emotional reaction, someone on a kind of sentimental binge of anxiety. But this is another kind of man who is looking and talking and thinking about this. All physical scientists know that it is relatively easy to make plutonium. We know this not as a journalistic fact at second hand, but as a fact in our own experience. We can work out the number of scientific and engineering personnel it needs for a nation state to equip itself with fission and fusion bombs. We know that for a dozen or more states, it will only take perhaps 6 years, perhaps fewer. Even the best informed of us always exaggerates these periods. This we know with the certainty of, what shall I call it, engineering truth. We also know that most of us are familiar with statistics and the nature of odds. We know with the certainty of statistical truth that if enough of these patterns are made by enough different states, some of them are going to blow up through accident or folly or madness. The motive doesn't matter. All this we know. We genuinely know the risks. We are faced with an either or, and we haven't much time. Either we accept a restriction, says he, of nuclear armaments. This is going to begin just as a token with an agreement on the stopping of nuclear tests. The United States is not going to get the 99.9% security that it's been asking for. It is unobtainable, though there are other bargains that the United States could probably secure. That is the either. Now, the or is not a risk, but a certainty. It is this. There is no agreement on tests. The nuclear arms race between the USA and the USR not only continues, but accelerates. Other countries join in. Within, at most, 6 years, China and several other states will have a stock of nuclear bombs. Within, at the most, 10 years, some of these bombs are going to go off. I'm saying this as responsibly as I can, says Sir Charles. That is the certainty. On the one side, therefore, we have a definite risk. On the other side, we have a certainty of disaster. Between a risk and a certainty, a sane man does not hesitate. Now, I have, in the little minutes that's left, 2 or 3 things to say. T.R. Glover suggests that the Roman Empire collapsed because the individual Roman citizen had lost his sense of responsibility for the empire. even though we for private or political or social reasons, we may not identify with those individuals who, perhaps from our point of view, may be going off half-cocked, who are holding vigils where down in Maryland or in some of the other places where this experimental work is going on. We may laugh at the kind of ridiculous uh, view of those persons in Scotland who were dumped in the water as they tried to offer some puny registration of judgment on the submarine that is based there. We may regard all of this as a kind of sentimentality and with which we cannot identify. That may be a judgment which you can sustain or which I can sustain. But this does not mean that we are not under very serious and critical obligations to do several things. We are under obligation to become acquainted with what is going on as nearly as possible, to develop a sense of fact, and it is no excuse that we are involved in the private fulfillment of our lives and earning our living and reproducing our kind and enjoying some measure of security for a limited time interval or for an indefinite time interval. There is a responsibility which we have to get acquainted with the facts of our world and the nature of the kinds of decisions that those who represent us in the arena of world politics are called upon to make, because each decision that is made commits every man, woman, boy, and girl in the country whose representative makes the decision. So this is the first. Now, we also, as it would seem to me, we are under some obligation to deal with the necessity of, even in our little way, of trying to think in terms of what are the possible alternatives or options available to modern man. What is there that can be distilled out of all of the wisdom of the religions, the ethics, the philosophy, the futilities of the past, that may give to us some measure of insight with reference to the problem which faces modern man. For the first time in human history, the possibility of the biological discontinuity of the human race is within reach of a single man's hand. And always in the past, as we have contemplated the fall of nations, the collapse of governments, the destructions of civilizations, always there has been riding on the judgment, stated explicitly or implicitly or written in the religious tradition and religious faith, the creative possibility of a remnant, some margin left that can pick up the pieces and become the growing edge of the mind of God for the redemption of the world, of nature and men. But any margin that is left, any any margin that is available, any remnant that is available, is contingent upon the continuity of man's biological existence. If there be no biological existence, then even the notion of the possibility, the redemptive possibility of the remnant, which has been the ground of the naturalistic and the theological optimism about the ultimate destiny of man. If there is no biological continuity, then this has no significance. Therefore, it is the responsibility not merely of those in power, not merely those who will make certain kinds of fateful decisions, but we are all under obligation, saint or sinner, good man or bad man, educated or uneducated, wise man, stupid. We are all under obligation to seek as best we may some other possibility. We do not know what the alternative is. We do not know whether there's enough wisdom in man to select a way that will be the source of redemption. We do not know whether there's enough moral maturity cumulative in man's long journey on the planet to give him the kind of wisdom and character that can float a sense of almost absolute power. But we've got to make soundings of every kind. For who knows? Just as 2,000 years ago, as there began to be a collapse of the world as we knew it, and the vaunted power and vitality of the Roman Empire began to respond to the termites that had been at work for so long a time. A little Jewish baby was born. And one politician was smart enough to recognize what this threat meant. And he sought to eliminate him, but he didn't. Who knows, but somewhere waiting to be born, or somewhere some ordinary man with an almighty dream may be waiting for a climate that can only be created by the masses of the human beings on the planet who, within their limitations, are busily at the level of their ordinary common life making soundings in community and announcing to existence that even though the judgment may be against man, I will not accept it. I will affirm the right to seek some other creative way by which the life of man might still have a chance in the world. And nobody is exempt from this necessity. As Petrarch said long ago, if at a time of great need those who are in power refuse to act, refuse to speak, then let any man speak, that the truth may be given wings. Herman Hagedorn said in his poem, The Unknown Soldier, at the close of the First World War, these words with which I stop. We died, but you who live must do a harder thing than dying is. For you must think, and ghosts shall drive you on. You must do a harder thing than dying is. For you must think, and ghosts shall drive you on. May the measure of our desperation, our Father, be contained by the depth of our faith. And for this, we offer the commitment of our lives.